And we are live. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Bigfoot Odysseys and Researchers Reports. We have a great show planned for you tonight. My name is Kerry Arnold. With me, as always, producer and co-host of the report, Miss Daniela Iolo. How are you, dear?
I'm good, thank you.
Good to see you.
Yeah, and you?
Getting used to this one day a week thing, huh?
Just about.
Well, one day for me, I'm getting used to it. I think you've picked up quite a few extras. Huh? Well, our guest for this evening, creator of the Owl Moon Lab. It's an audio book, and you can find that on strangebrowradio.com. We're going to have a link in the description for the Patreon where you can go and listen to this. He is a Bigfoot researcher, been a researcher for about 15 years. Kind of incorporates, I think you mentioned you incorporate the supernatural with the Sasquatch stuff. Is that right, Toby?
Well, they incorporated it towards their end, and I just followed suit. But yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you for joining us here tonight. We appreciate you coming on.
You got it.
So, well, let's wait just a few minutes. We got a few pouring in here. Just remind everybody, make sure you go and subscribe to Hidden Existence. We have the other Researchers Report on Hidden Existence every Saturday night, 7:00 p.m. Central. That's Daniela's channel. If you're not subscribed to Hidden Existence, you're going to get the second Saturday Researchers Report over there now, and our brand new channel called The Shudder. Check out The Shudder. I've got 8 stories coming out tonight after this. I got to finish the last one, but it's 8 creepy encounters. So if you haven't subscribed to The Shudder, that's SHUDDER, by the way, go and check that out. We've got a lot of cool accounts on there, and this is all viewer submissions, and I think 1 or 2 that I got off of blog spots, but they're short stories. It's only going to be about a 10 or 12 minute long video tonight. So, all right. Well, let's jump right in. Toby, 15 years, man. How did you get started doing this? What happened?
Well, as I say in the beginning of the book, I was introduced to the paranormal through the eyes of a child, sitting down at a matinee for Close Encounters of the Third Kind and watching Richard Dreyfuss's character Roy Neary build a mountain of mashed potatoes, which we know now as Devil's Tower.
Right.
But as a child, watching a grown man play with his food and say, this means something, it really struck a chord with me pretty much all my life. And so I chased mysteries down and thought that they did mean something. There was more than just science fiction and fantasy and lore. There was a beginning to this, a catalyst, a foundation. And in the Pacific Northwest, the Native Americans talk about Sasquatch being a spirit animal. And so that was my introduction, is that this was a spirit animal, but yet it was also a native. They included it on their totem poles along with other things that were real. And yet I had science saying, not so fast, young man. This is something that we need to understand through only Darwinism and through Newtonian science. And that didn't cut the mustard, not from what I was hearing from these extended experiencers. So after meeting a couple extended experiencers back in 2008 timeframe, I found out quickly that the stories got very strange. And so I started to follow the strange.
So I'm guessing Bigfoot was a little bit more of a draw than any of the other cryptids or ghosts or anything like that.
Well, yes,
just where you were.
I mean, of course, Close Encounters is about abductees, about people experiencing the impossible close up. And so I think anything that was coming my way had to be some kind of open-ended mystery that seemed impossible to the rest of the game. I mean, let's face it, most kids are invested in stuff like this in general, and it's marketed as such, really. I mean, it's become kind of a laughable thing to be invested until lately with disclosure afoot. Now we have the Pentagon talking about the reality and the military talking about the reality of UFOs or UAPs. So what was scoffed at and laughed at for generations has now become mainstream media. And so this paranormal aspect of Sasquatch, to me, is on the same map. It's on the same path as the years of the abductee being laughed at. So I found a Sasquatch looking track in the little town of Springfield, Oregon back in 2007 with my son, and we thought it was hoaxed. And we showed a friend of ours that had made a movie called Sasquatch that was filmed up in the Three Sisters Wilderness. And it was kind of a spin-off of Patty's film, Patterson Gimlin footage film. And so we talked to this guy about our photograph that we'd taken of the suspected hoax Bigfoot track. And he said, well, it may be a bear, it may be a hoax, but they're real. And I looked up for them all these years. If you want to meet a witness, I can set you up, have coffee with this guy. So in 2008, I met this river guide, and he had multiple encounters. He told me that over a period of years, he had learned that you can see these things in certain areas and you can get to know them. And there's this weird element to being an experiencer. And in fact, after our coffee meeting, he said, the story's far too weird, and I'll tell you the rest of it later, but you'd never believe me. And so we had that second coffee date, and it was a weird story. But what I quickly started to figure out is that if I could get myself in proximity to a location to meet extended experiencers or long-term witnesses or habituators, if I can get a hot spot, then maybe they'll come to me and I can take these stories firsthand. So I started to do conferences, something called Oregon Sasquatch Symposium. And that's where I met the wide diversity of people, including, the Cliffs and the Meldrums and the Bob Gimlins. And then I met, the Ron Moorhead types and the Tom Powell types and Henry Franzoni types. And then I met Sally Shepard Walford, who wrote the Valley of the Skookum, which tells kind of a romanticized version of living in the little town of Ording, Washington, with a family of Sasquatch that her and her daughter Autumn Williams saw. And that book had such a ring of truth to it, but it was so beautiful. And it almost seemed to be romanticizing a version of Sasquatch that seemed relatively too good to be true, I guess, but yet it had such an authenticity to it. And what I found is that romanticized version is the closer version of what these extended experiencers will tell me, especially the ones that don't move. Because Sally's book talked about cloaking. It talked about the lights. It talked about seeing an individual Sasquatch with a baby and how they would come up to the cabin and basically play these games, all hours of the day. And it affected the family dynamic, which that's a point that I probably should have made a better, example of in my book, is that there's a huge implication of living with the supernatural, which for me is living with Sasquatch, because I think that it invites all of the things into its corridor. So when you live in a hot spot where Bigfoot calls itself its second home, which is your home, all these other things seem to happen there as well. It's often compared to as the cantina, the Star Wars bar. You have all these other entities and aliens that have invited themselves into your cantina. So Sally's book, as far as all the books, was really my introduction into the authentic version of Bigfoot.
Well, I just want to say right quick, we will take questions for TOBE about the last 15, 20 minutes of the show. I'll let Daniela get into your personal experiences, but there does seem to be a broad spectrum of behavior, reported behavior from this creature, and then in turn, a broad spectrum of opinions about the creature and what they do. What you believe or what you know about these creatures, do you think it can be put on all of them? I mean, do you think it's just like a deer? You hunt a deer in the Pacific Northwest, it's just like hunting a deer in South Mississippi? Or would you say that there's something about them that lends to this them being different? Are there different types? What do you think about that?
I would be surprised to say that they don't have these attributes, all of them. To the degree they use them or know them or learn them or adapt them may depend upon the location. And I think it depends on the individual, because they know your instincts. They know your intentions. And this has a lot to do with what the intentions or the motive of the experiencer is, which is a really odd thing to say to somebody who's Newtonian science based, but they seem to, work with people. And so this is where ego gets involved, because once you start saying, oh, I'm working with a Bigfoot and I'm having all these communications with this individual or this teacher, trust me, I know how that sounds. It sounds horrible. And I've had to sit there next to these guys and hear them drone on about their teachers. And there's something to it, though, to the fact that I don't feel like I have a teacher. I feel like we got incredibly close in the little town of Cottage Grove, Oregon, to learning who individuals were. And we may still have that opportunity at the windows closing, but there's a unique attribute nature to the humanity of Bigfoot. And seems to be a type of humanity there just as much as the animal.
Yeah, I would agree, which would make them individual, just as, people are individual from each other. There's something about being able to process and work things out and plan, that, the normal non-self-aware animal just doesn't have. They're controlled by nature and a slave to their stomach. And then for the most part, you can pin all the, same type of behavior from one to another, across the country. But this creature doesn't appear to be that way, which to me makes it that much harder for us to understand anything about them, because you hear so much from one side of the country to the other. I mean, all the same experiences, just a lot different from one another in different places. And then, I mean, that kind of, it almost makes it almost obvious to me that their life experience drives the way they operate and the way they behave, as it does with people. I think if they have a bad experience with people, then they're not going to be very friendly with people. If they have good experiences, I suppose. But it seems to me that there's this palpable indifference to us as far as they're concerned. They just don't want to be around us for the most part, mostly, I guess.
Yeah, mostly. But I was of that mind too when I wasn't working with extended experiencers. Now, there are these areas, these hotspots you can go to have contact with a group of them. A lot of places have place names. Henry Franzoni wrote a book called The Spirit of Seattle that talks about place names, places that sound like spirit-derived names, like Valley of the Skookum or Spirit Mountain or Devil's Ridge. These places are hotspots for a reason, but the extended experiencers have been taken a liking to for the most part. I would say, well over 75% of the cases, or the people that I got to know, I hate saying cases because it's not really a case anything. It's just me getting to know individuals, have a really interesting kind of gamesmanship relationship with a group of teenagers. That's for the most part what it sounds like the old days when you'd TP somebody's house and you'd wait for their expression. That's the kind of gamesmanship we're talking about here. So I can't really count that up as being malicious or indifferent, because they brought us a hell of a lot of gifts, and they still do. I live in a place here in Port Orchard, Washington, where we still get this kind of gifting or game process going on. Now, is it all Bigfoot? No. That's what's so cool about it, is that you've opened up some kind of door, or you're within the realm of some kind of doorway that you can sometimes see, or maybe even take a photograph of. I'm not using the word portal because I don't know what this door is, but there's other things that seem to coalesce around these doorways, and the big ones are UFOs and ghosts. Skinwalker Ranch is that place in everybody's head, right? I mean, now we know they spent millions of dollars. Harry Reid had money funneled to study this place on a scale, but these skinwalker places, skin twins is what I call them, are all over the globe, and they're in these place name areas. Well, the Al Moon Lab is just one of those areas out of millions that exist. And so all of those things happened at this place and are happening. I just got done talking to the new property owners that ended up buying it about a year ago. They had no idea where to kind of look for the hot spots on their property, but there are these little hot spots that exist within the unique area confines of the property owners where things are triggered. And so if you know where to look, if you're into it, that's the big thing, is that you have to be into it. You have to be open to the idea that, hey, I'm not BSing you. The thing is, I don't want people to waste their time looking for a giant mountain monkey. That almost doesn't even exist. Yes, they have that appearance, but the other stuff, the other cool stuff that happens in and around a Bigfoot hotspot, boy, oh boy, it'll change your perspective, and you just learn to let go of all the science and all the studying and all the casting and have an actual experience with the phenomena. It will just blow your mind.
Well, I understand what you're saying about the extended experiencers, habituators, whatever you want to call them. But I mean, that's something that's a trust that's earned there. I mean, that's not something that they just start doing automatically, right? I mean, isn't there a thing that they kind of work up to with these creatures?
You know, yes and no. I mean, when it comes to the extended experiencers I worked with, there's 5 I mentioned in the book. And most of them still have experiences. Now, they had contact, at least. Let's go to Jeff Boyler's case. He was a deputy sheriff up in the Three Sisters Wilderness, and you can watch his episode called Watched in the Woods. It was on season 1 of Paranormal Witness. Deputy sheriff, Three Sisters Wilderness, on a hike. As he's going up the bluff, he sees what looks like a red elk, the back end of an elk. Turns around, it's got head and shoulders. He has his first Bigfoot encounter. And he says, you know, as I was looking at this Bigfoot, I dropped my jaw and cocked my head to the side in disbelief at what I was looking at. And this thing did the same thing. He goes, what I told the TV crew was that it copied me. But he goes, since you're into all this weird stuff, he goes, this thing didn't copy me. It made fun of me. It mocked me. It was letting me know, as a guy that profiles people all day, I've been tracking you since you pulled in with your car. You know, watch out, buddy. And he goes, then it got weirder. He goes, it was at the moment I even thought about grabbing my sidearm, my station issued sidearm with me, that this thing left. He goes, I didn't even reach for it. It was at the moment I thought this thing bolted. So those kind of small details from a cop, it's big news.
Sure.
But the thing is, Jeff had activity after that too. He moved out to the country, a little town of Deer Creek near Springfield, Oregon. And he would still see red eye shine looking at his cabin from across the road. So did he have a scary encounter? Hell yeah, he had a really scary encounter. But whatever happened there, he was okay with it, to the fact that he maybe went into an area he wasn't supposed to go into. He didn't take it personal. And he still had red eye shine watching him from his deck. And he was certain at what he'd seen. So a lot of these extended experiencers I talk to, there'll usually be one person okay with it, and the other person a hard skeptic or not okay with it, because they're watching what's happening to the other person who's getting consumed. And it's not okay. I mean, you have to be careful with how the relationship balance of the supernatural and those in your house. I mean, we talk about that in our own lives. So this is something, you know, there should be a whole case study on this, a John Mack type case study on the inner
Sure. Oh, absolutely. If someone would fund it. And you know, looking at what do you say, and this is just one more thing I'm going to say before I'm running into Daniela's time here. What do you say to the people that are habituating or having extended experiences with these creatures in different places in the United States, but are not experiencing the supernatural stuff? They're not experiencing, you know, anything out of the ordinary. They're seeing these creatures. They're having interactions with them. Myself, I was around them for 7 years. Now, I didn't know they were there until looking back and realizing it, until I saw one and they ran me out of there. But I mean, I don't recall having any of those experiences, but there are people, Mark and Melanie's asked you, Christopher Noel, that have extended experiences with these creatures, but aren't experiencing these other things. So do you think it could be a regional thing, or is it tribal? So like you said, something that may be learned.
Right.
What do you think about that?
I don't want to put this on the extended experiencers as they're omitting evidence, but the unfortunate fact is that there is a lot of omission involved with the supernatural, because it's an uncomfortable fact of life that it happens. So when it happens, I think a lot of times they're confronting a decision. It's already weird enough that I have the phenomena here. Now I have to choose to follow this path here. And, you know, I've had these conversations before with the hard apers out there that believe that we're looking for a giant mountain monkey, a relic hominid. But the extended experiencers generally, they are dying to talk to somebody like me that will say, okay, I believe you. How crazy was it for you? And that was my experience. But obviously, you're going to find that there are areas where it's just one phenomena. And that was never my intention to go look for just the one phenomena.
Right.
I thought maybe that was possible, that in the end, it was going to be one phenomena, but I never was motivated by that because I kept on hearing about the ghost and the UFOs in relationship.
Well, I mean, I can't disagree with that. I mean, I don't know what's being withheld. Obviously, only these other people do. Just for myself, and like I said, I don't recall having those type of experiences. It could have all been happening around me. I don't know, but you have to think that even though that they're not all connected in the same way. I mean, I compare it to the Native Americans, the 18 million Native Americans that were here for thousands of years before, you know, the white man ever came, or before anybody else ever came. And the different tribes, the 80 different tribes and all the hundreds of different offshoots of tribes, and they all were different, spoke different languages, had different behaviors. Right. And I just wonder if that's not the case with this creature.
And, you know, and to give credence to what you're saying there, I think that they only give you what you can handle. The Bigfoot stuff is very patient with people. It doesn't just come barging in as much as they're described as doing that. Mostly, like you said, they're evading. So whatever your intention is, if you want to know more, experience more, like we were hungry for it, we were adrenaline junkies for it, it came in at droves like that. Now, where I live now, it's way more subtle, and it comes in kind of like earthquake fault. It's just like, oh, okay, activity tonight. We hear howls, okay, but not always. But we have a lot of walls up here too, right? We're not inviting it in as much as we were down in Oregon. So I think that they know, they know things going on with what you're speaking about, what your personal lives are. They know your family dynamic. They watch all those things. Now, to go one step beyond that and say that they know your intention, your pre-thought, that they're, you know, reading your mind, you don't even have to say that. They're so tuned in to these family dynamics that I think if it got really aggressive to the point where it was a problem, you know, those are the kind of things that we hear described, and we feel sorry for people like the, you know, Battle at Hanobi and things like that. But I think those are really rare cases.
I don't know. If you listen to Sasquatch Chronicles, you know, there are just a lot of them. I don't know how rare they are. I get a lot of stories, you know, some of them are pretty anemic. Yeah. But there's some terrifying stuff going on there. And I mean, who knows what we haven't heard, you know, but I can also,
maybe people would have been scared at the place I live too. Now, when I describe it to you, it may freak the hell out of you, and maybe I'm nuts for thinking it's a-okay. So it could be a personality dynamic.
I'm sure it is.
Yeah, right.
I'm with you 100%. It probably is. You know, the nature of the person experiencing the stuff, I'm sure has a lot to do with it too. Absolutely.
Yeah.
I've kind of always thought that it's just the perception, isn't it? Where you stood at the time and how you're feeling. Is you know, that's how you take it to be. These hotspots, what's the common factor with them all? What's the clues to where these places are?
Man, well, the one thing you can say for certain is that most extended experiencers of Bigfoot stuff don't live in the inner city. They live rural. And to say that they don't live far from a creek, well, I'd be lying. They live close to a creek. They live close to a mountain ridge. They live close to a tree line. They live close to power lines. Heck, they live close to freeways and highways, even in the country, logging roads, things like that. Those are the places that I'm familiar with. Now, give me another 15 years and maybe I'll come up with some more clues. But the supernatural aspect of it.
I think what I should have said was the portals. Sorry. What I know you don't want to call them portals. I think that's what.
Well, no, absolutely. Let's call them portals.
It's a good descriptor. People understand what you're talking about.
Yeah. So an entry point, an exit point, things that they described in Skinwalker Ranch, right? I mean, they describe a Sasquatch stepping out of a portal the same way Adam Davies describes seeing a Sasquatch walk out of a portal. So the same idea, is present all over the place. Now, why does it happen in certain areas and not other areas? Well, I think abductees is one thing. I think people are taken. And so wherever these abductees live, it could be something based upon their family lineage. It seems like mainly the female side they're interested in more of. You follow the mother's side. I know that in Daryl and Cindy's case, the Adams family that owned the Al Moon Lab before it sold had both had poltergeist experiences. I think even like one house before they bought this house, they had seen ectoplasm fall from the walls. So it was a highly charged supernatural area. And plus, Daryl has already got the gift where he senses stuff in his fingers. So plus, there's Native American roots on Daryl's side. So could be the people, could be the land. There's a lot of quartz coming down in the area where he lived and water flowing through quartz veins. We lived between a spring, a quartz vein, and water, 2 springs. So plus there was remodeling done at the house, mainly outside. So I think all those things help. However, it's in a Bigfoot hotspot, Cottage Grove, Umpqua Forest in Oregon. That's where we found the London tracks. I know those are on the debate stage as far as Cliff's is concerned. Me and my son found those tracks. The story behind those tracks is so concrete, and the witnesses that found them, including me and my son and everybody else down there that I invited, that's a Bigfoot hotspot. And there's a lot of sightings, a lot of tracks, and a lot of local legend about the Dorina Wildman. So a lot of UFO stuff, a lot of ghost stuff, a lot of Bigfoot stuff, and an old mining town where quartz, and I think there's something to the quartz thing because quartz holds memory, right? So maybe there's something going on with that.
Are these tracks, are these the ones that are on the back of the truck in the photos?
I don't know what photos you got.
Um,
Oh, no, those are actually recent. Those are from last year. So that is from the property above the Al Moon Lab, which is the name for the actual property. That is public land, and that's the current research area. So those are 4, 15 or better inch tracks going into the site now where Daryl has started feeding. We never did that before, but since he moved, he wanted to still have activity, and he felt like, well, we all felt like the parabolic was pointing specifically to the area where the power lines were. And we would record as such too in the audio. I mean, we had 1,200 hours worth of audio of them sneaking up to the house, popping in and out of, I mean, it's the damnedest thing when you're recording in the middle of a gravel bed and you don't hear footstep 1 in the middle of gravel, and all of a sudden you hear a pop sound, which is indicative of a supernatural act, in my opinion, or a hit or a snap or a tree pop sound. And then you'll hear feet walking. Okay, so not possible to walk through gravel without making a sound unless you're a really light bird or you're, a Starbucks paper cup going across. Not a 1,000-pound bipedal person. And we recorded a lot of those sounds. And at first, Daryl, well, the story really starts with finding these giant knee impressions. Now, these are, 1,000-pound plus knee impressions that we found in the substrate above his house. Now, those have been analyzed hair-wise, analyzed anatomically. There is a new report that you didn't get called the Dragoo-Taylor report. A buddy of mine, Scott Taylor, who's a Boeing engineer manager, and then Joe Dragoo, who's a sonographer and looks at joints through sonography. So we know those are knees. We haven't verified. Dr. Robert Alley's coming down here to take a look at him. The author
you can see the hair on
those.
Sasquatch. You can see the hair.
The hair flow.
You can see the hair.
Period. Yeah, you can see it a little bit. I mean, man, these have not been shown off to a lot of people because they're big. I mean, it's a solid plaster cast. It's not 2 separate ones, right? It's both knees. And you can see the patella, you can see the joints, you can see the fat tissue, you can see the hair, you can see where it sucked the red clay out when it left. And then there's this like fanning effect on the backside where you can see skin folds. It's an amazing example, but I thought it was an elk. I mean, the reason that we cast it is because I was doing a live event, and I thought, well, I'll call Cindy Dosen, who runs the Hominid Enigma project up in BC. And she's a well-respected woman in this community, works with the Olympic Project. She can analyze the hair, and we'll document it just like we did the London tracks. And then we'll show the audience, hey, this is how you cast something. If it comes back a cow, an elk, a moose, an elephant, it didn't matter. It was the process. And so we threw her up on the big screen at a, this bar called the Axe and Fiddle. And Ron Moorhead sitting in the audience with his wife, Kerry, and everybody's sitting there waiting to hear what Cindy Dosen said. And she goes, it's an unknown hair testing likely to match only 6 other Sasquatch hairs out of, 200 samples that I've looked at. And so she lists the reasons why she feels that way, because she, believes in Sasquatch.
What about size? I'm sorry. I just wanted right quick before we get too far away from it. What about size? How would you compare those ratio wise to a normal grown male person?
Way out of depth as far as depth in the mud, because we did my knees. I went to the same place, filmed everything, and I did a weight displacement measurement so Scott Taylor could do the math part. And so that's how we came back with my size, which was 215. And then we deducted, my weight and divided it somehow based upon the depth of the same substrate. And he came back actually with over 1,200 pounds.
Wow.
So we have something in excess of 1,000 pounds. Now, they've been seen up there multiple times. And actually, in the last month, they've been seen twice in and around the same area. Not by me. I mean, I live 6 hours away. So somebody else is playing Bigfoot down in my old hotspot and having awesome, because the only thing I've ever seen is the feet, the possible feet. I guess if you're going to see something on a Bigfoot, you might as well see its feet, right? So right. That happened kind of like my last day actually at this property, because I move in there full time after we cast these knees. I already have this 10 years, 12 years of working with extended experience. So I tell Daryl Adams, and I was like, Daryl, and you should get him on the show too. It'd be a great interview. It's like, this is probably going to get really weird as far as the phenomena is concerned. I've worked with these other extended experiencers, and now you're recording strange pop and click sounds inside and outside the house. Plus, the neighbors are telling me that they see a blue-eyed bear walking down the ridge on 2 feet. The other gal in the yurt up there says she has pine cones thrown horizontally at her all time of day. Her father, whose cat went missing, has a cat delivered to his back door with a smushed head. Okay, so I was like, they're here. Now I think they know that we took the knees. And I think they must know what I'm into. I mean, I'm doing a live event down the road. I don't think these are just animals. I said, it's probably going to get super weird. Are you sure you want to do this? Do you want to go public? Do you want me to step away? Is this all too much? Because you have to give these families a choice. A lot of people say you shouldn't go forward with their names or where they live. Well, the Adams weren't like that at all. They wanted both. Cindy and Daryl Adams, Cottage Grove, Oregon. In fact, they wanted people to know where their house was. I'm like, well, I don't know about the exact location. It may ruin things for everybody. Sure. But, we went through all the steps that you go through as far as checking out how this could be hoaxed. Things started to occur there to the point where I moved in, and I moved my camper only about 35 feet away from this giant shop, a metal shop that was just built right after Daryl moves in. And you could park 2 RVs in it. Just a really cool, big green metal shop. But we start recording these really weird sounds. And they sound like click, pop, hits, wood knocks in the mountain, at the house, all over. Then strange gifts start showing up. One of the first things that showed up was a red cooler was set in the middle of a trail that Daryl had just walked on. Now, I told him all my strange stories that I mentioned in the Al Moon book about gifts suddenly appearing. The only thing is that this red cooler had moss on the top of the little plastic handle, and it was sitting in the middle of the trail as he was headed out. Now, what's even stranger is that he was just talking to me about going back home to get water for his dog. Now, that may not mean anything to anybody else, but I talked to you earlier about the romanticized version that Sally Shepherd Walford talked about. What if they heard that need? What if somehow, some way, they're basically communicating like thirsty dog? Izzy was the dog's name. Okay. We can somehow assist in this process here. Okay. So I paid attention to those stories, and I told him to pay attention to those. Now, this may get into why they were coming in so often, is that we were cluing into these messages. I mean, I'd been waiting 15 years for a moment like this, or 12 years or 13 years. And so I wasn't going to just let it all go as far as like, oh, it's too incredible, it can't be that way. Well, it is that way. And so all these things started to amp up. Little gifts turned into bigger gifts. And they were paying attention to what we were talking about. Now, why do we think it was a lot of Bigfoot stuff and not just UFO and ghost stuff, which we have plenty of? It's because we'd find giant hairy handprints, greasy oil-based handprints that look like sausages ripped right out of the bag. On the bed of the truck, they'd grab the bungee cords, rip them in half. We'd find giant handprints on the door seal or the underhanging of the shop. We'd find hair in the grooves of my trailer. And then I would record them at periods over, especially this 5-month summer, 2018, doing things like eating blackberries. And then, because I was working graveyard, and so I'd leave my little recorder going in front of the camper, and you would hear bipedal approach to the blackberries, hear them consume blackberries, and then at one point leave a trail of blackberries from underneath my vinyl awning, headed out to the tree line through the gravel, and then aspirate. They would actually sneeze, in my opinion, up on the vinyl awning, about a 6-inch swath of berry juice. And I recorded the whole thing. It's in the audio.
Wow.
So it got to the point like we want to see one, right? Like enough of this cat and mouse game. And Daryl ended up seeing one less than 6 months ago, finally. And then before I left the property, I ended up seeing the feet of one from probably 40 feet away.
Wow. Now, those tracks that you had there, are those one trackway?
So multiple trackways. The thing is that with Bigfoot tracks, they're not always consistent.
Right.
The thing is, tracks are usually way too deep or way too light for the substrate they're in.
I just didn't know if you had tracked those all in one spot.
Right.
Or
no,
what?
there are different approaches that they take in. And it seemed like as they got closer to Daryl's bait area or food station or gifting area, the tracks would get deeper and more pronounced, like they were coming in a hurry and getting out in a hurry. I mean, that's the only thing I could think of if you want to go Newtonian, but I'm not really in that camp. So I think what was happening is that they were suddenly coming into existence, leaving a track, and then they were out of there. However they do it.
I got you. And the knees, was that the same place, the same area there too?
Within 30 minutes, yeah.
Now, what do you think about they have to, going by the logic, what you're explaining here, they have to know that they scare us, for the most part. They have to know that. And if they know that, do you think that's why maybe they just don't present themselves as often as they do? Because what most people tend to do when they're scared is defend themselves, especially if they have a gun. It can be a dangerous situation.
I think when they come to your place, they try not to scare you as much as see how scared you get by little things like gifting or by peeking through the windows, things like that. I mean, these are all attributes I generally think that the teenager variety do, the under, 8-foot realm. Although I think most of these were probably in between 7 and 8 feet tall, just based upon the size of the hands. But who really knows? I mean, what Daryl saw, he said, shocked the hell out of him because it looked like minute bull. It had no muscle mass, and it was lanky, and it was jumping through the briars on a power line stretch behind his house. So I don't know what they think. I mean, it's
well. I mean, I'm just going by behavior. What you hear about behavior and the way they behave. I mean, obviously, we don't know what they think, and when it comes to the ones you're describing, we have to pretty much assume that they're not cookie cutter. They don't all get to be 8 or 10 feet tall.
No, they're like people. I mean, they have personalities that, attributes to their personality. So they're not like animals have that. I mean, I have 3 pugs. They all have the same personality, be weird. They all totally different. So everything's got its own, personality, and the variety that we experienced and most of the extended experiencers I worked with seems to be playful variety, unless you have someone with a gun. Okay, the moment you bring in self-defense and fear, I think there's this permission slip of just like, hey, we're not going to play nice anymore. We got kids too. Okay, you basically moved in on our habitat here. We watched the whole construction crew come in and rip out, down our nursery. Whatever happened. I mean,
Right.
maybe they hold resentments based upon where you live and how you live there. Alcoholics, they have a really bad time with this phenomena. In fact, it makes people into alcoholics. It makes people into drug users. It makes good men bad men. It makes a lot of good men assholes, actually. I worked with a lot of used to be good men in my time that got involved with this, and they turned into straight up assholes. So I think that's a lot of ego stuff that comes in. They're the deliverers of the message. They're going to write the great book about it. You let the extended experiencer kind of take you in on this journey if you're lucky enough to have this moment with them. And, you just lean back and let them show you how to unfold this all. I mean, so much of this is not dictated by you. You have to let go of your own preconceived notions about how any of this works, and to a greater degree kind of start over. The old way of thinking won't help. They don't work in those terms anymore. As far as how I was able to look at this, I couldn't go back and say, okay, I can use those old ways of thinking here to help me understand how extended experiencers are going to deal with this. I basically had to retrain my brain.
Well, I mean, I can agree with some of that. I mean, it happened to me. I was probably turned into the worst person imaginable after that, or before that even. I wasn't such a nice guy that I am now. Happy-go-lucky dude.
Right,
So I can agree with some of that. It's just you hear so many different stories, and it's all obviously it's all anecdotal. We get a lot of them. I get a lot of them sent to me, and it's just you can't put that same behavior on all of them. And I just wonder what do you think the difference might be? And I'm taking over the show here from Daniela.
Oh, that's okay.
She's got plenty of stuff. Well, she I just don't want her getting upset at me because I kind of get into.
You can reach across the screen, Danielle, and just grab that.
What are you doing now? Are you going to answer his question, or should I just ask the question?
Well, no,
yeah. Do you think?
What was the question again?
Well, it was just a statement that,
Okay.
from our observation, I'm not disagreeing with anything you're saying. I actually agree with a lot of it. There's just so many contrasting points to it that come to us that don't really match up with that. And it just lends to me that it's almost obvious that these creatures are just different from one another in different places, that they don't all act the same. Maybe they all have these abilities, but maybe they just don't show them.
I mean, I would take a freaky extended experiencer story on my podcast, but I won't take a roadside crossing story. What am I going to do with that? I mean, you go to another show and hear about a bow hunter that saw Bigfoot. God bless you. But the supernatural aspect of Bigfoot is so pronounced and so prevalent and so ready for anybody to embrace it that it's just ridiculous. And so most of my APER friends, all the Olympic Project, BFRO people, they've been holding back for years because they think they have standing. They think they have standing. And they don't have standing because they've basically omitted and lied their way to get to where they are. And I understand it. I mean, you're already the laughing stock of your family. And now this, okay, I get it. But the thing is, when you're telling the truth, eventually they're going to be the ones with egg on their face. I mean, that's where we are with the UFO community. And so you just have to hold on longer and be okay with it and not be an asshole about it. You can't say, oh, I told you so. I mean, bravo for me. So, if the phenomena is way cooler than my APER friends told me it was. And I didn't think that they had actually experienced anything, really. I mean, because they seem so tied in Newtonian science. But man, you get a beer in their hand and a campfire, then you're going to hear the real story.
Yeah, we know all too well.
Do you hear anything about healing? Are people experiencing that?
Well, of course, yeah. I've not. We haven't experienced that. We know people that have been taken to sites for that. I don't really know how I feel about that, because I think that gets into a cult mentality. It props up a personality to say, in order to get the A, you need to go through me to get it. And I am the soul. You know what I mean? Like, it feels dirty. And a lot of times there's no money transferred around, which is good. That's a good sign. But the ego is its own power and weight, right? I mean, I talk about the Lord of the Rings all the time in my show as far as the burden of the ring. Well, once you understand that the supernatural is kind of connected with you, it turns into a burden, and it makes good men assholes and good women. So you have to be careful about this healing stuff, because yeah, I think it happens in the supernatural, but have you just made a trade-off? I mean, is there a free lunch, really? Okay. If there is, okay, let's talk about this remarkable attribute of the supernatural or Bigfoot healing. But that was never something that we experienced. I don't think it was anything we even asked for, and we did ask for stuff, and it delivered. So had we asked for something, I don't know, it might have happened.
Take away my toothache.
Yeah.
Start small.
Yeah.
You were doing experiments in different places.
Mm-hmm.
Were they the same experiments to connect all this together in a way?
I mean, the way the Owl Moon got its name was because the knees were found on a Good Friday of March 30th, 2018. But it was also a full moon called the Owl Moon. So that's how it got the Owl Moon. And then the lab portion was, as I was building Ron Moorhead, a giant 8-foot Sasquatch replica called Biggie. And Daryl's like, damn, you're turning my garage into Frankenstein's laboratory. So that's the iteration of how it got its name. But then it was like, well, shit, they did it in Skinwalker Ranch. Let's start testing out the supernatural. It's presenting itself here in a way that it's kind of letting us look at it for longer than a second. And it's happening all day, every day in some shape or form, one way or another. Now, it took little breaks. But so we started to record mainly audio in the front yard and the backyard. In the gravel parking area, all gravel, was where my trailer was. I would record with my little Tascam DR05, the best recorder that a Bigfooter could have, in my opinion, for $90. And then Daryl's recording with a parabolic. And so about 1,200 hours later, we walk away with all these amazing sounds. Now, they were EVP sounds, so we started to study EVPs. I've never looked into those stuff ever. But we found out that there's this layered theory that you can invest time and energy into, where if you want to understand how the supernatural works, that it lives in layers, right? So between these layers are the EVPs, or the digital phenomena, where you get the signature from the other side.
We're getting some bad feedback here. That's not me, is it?
No, I think it's coming from your end, Tob. Suddenly it started.
Okay. How bad is it?
That's bad. It's
it's pretty bad now. It's just like really bad. It's gone now.
Okay.
Well, no, now there it is again. It's just when you talk into the mic, maybe there's something you put up there close to it. You have your cell phone. My cell phone does it. My cell phone.
No, but it could be the host unmuted your mic.
Yeah, I just did that just to make sure it was you.
Okay.
And turned it back on real quick. Yeah, it's just some bad feedback from your mic. It's like when you listen back, you'll hear it. What we're talking about here.
Cryptic static.
Yeah, they're getting upset with you, giving out all their secrets, man.
Well, let me check my mic here and make sure we're good. Looks like I'm still on the same mic I should be, which is
Try and come back in again, out and in.
Yeah.
okay.
Try
Leave
that.
studio.
Yes.
Come back
Yeah,
in.
I might just do it. Yeah, it's funny how that just came on.
Yeah. All of a sudden, I used to get that build up, but when I started using these and not using the speakers from the computer, it quit doing it. So, and these things hurt. There it is.
Okay, how's that?
Perfect.
It's better.
Yes.
Yeah.
Gone.
Now we
Yeah,
were just
yeah.
talking about EVPs and talking about how things get involved with the layers of digital devices. Now this is not the first time that we've had some weird, I'm not saying this is super weird, but there has been some super weird stuff that has happened to the point where people just like, what in the heck? So maybe this is part of that.
It
When you
happens
talk
here.
about this stuff, I mean, if you read John Keel, Mothman Prophecies, he talks a lot about the paranormal looking back at you when you look at it. So they have an ample opportunity to interfere or play games with us at any moment.
It happens here. Daniela has an orb regularly around her that we see from time to time. So it's definitely not a bug, and it's not dust, and it changes direction. So it's very, everybody that's seen it is like, wow. So if you
all right,
want to go
I'm
back
gonna
and
be
see
looking
it,
now.
it's definitely there. I think it's Barney myself, her dog that passed away. So
to answer your question, we did some experiments. We would record layers. So we record audio and video, and then audio in the back of video. And between those layers, we would find our answer that yes, the supernatural exists within these layer tape theories. That was Henry Franzoni's idea. And so we had a lot of experiences like that. We'd have things show up on our phone that we didn't take pictures of that had no timestamp or date stamp. Recently, I took a picture of what looked like a portal developing above, it was actually at the sticks near a 17-inch track. And there's no explanation for this photograph, which looks like you're inside a hurricane with a bullet center, like down the barrel of a gun, right in the middle of the forest. Just me taking a photograph of sticks in a highly supernaturally charged area. Joe Hauser gets that phenomena. He thinks it's a vortex or some kind of portal.
Mike Patterson,
Barb Shoup gets that stuff. Paul Graves got some shots like that up in Wenatchee. So there's stuff that happens on digital devices.
Cool. What was that question you had up there from Brandon?
There
it is.
What other
things have you seen, experienced out in the woods? Have you tried using old school Polaroid cameras to take pictures, see any portals?
Yeah. I haven't used, no, I like that idea. The old school Polaroids look cool.
Or just an old 35.
We would leave out sizzle magnets. Do you guys know what those are?
Doesn't sound familiar.
They're magnet balls, and when you throw them together in the midair, they make a sizzly sound. So they're just sphere magnets, and they make a very distinct sound when they collide. They kind of sizzle. Okay, and so we would leave those out in interesting places to see if they would collide, because they'd have to be picked up at one section of the forest and the other section, and it make a very distinct sound. And so we'd leave a recorder and those out there. And if we left them inside this haunted shop that we haven't really talked about, we'd draw lines with chalk around them and leave them in the grooves of the cement floor. And so we would record those sizzle magnets colliding, but they'd never move. Or they were put back so precise that, a little piece of Doug fir duff wasn't even moved over the top of it. So extreme precision, but yet the sound of the magnets moving. Now, on one occasion, inside the shop at the Almoon Lab, moved 12 feet and stuck to the garage door. The other one left over 12 feet and went towards the knees, and it left behind a trail of slime. It looked like jelly. And so everything we recorded, I mean, if there was some kind of supernatural event, I didn't know what else to call that. I mean, it kind of looked like what people describe as ectoplasm. It didn't really have a smell. It just looked like a slug was attached to this magnet and ran with it. But it wasn't slug. it was kind of like olive oil, but more viscous. Very weird, obviously. We'd record property damage on Daryl's place, including these 2 T-posts that were bent down. We asked them not to do any more property damage, and they came back and straightened the T-post.
Wow.
Yeah.
Do you think it's possible that there are these paranormal places, highly charged energy places, and Sasquatch just happen to be in those places too? I mean, could it be simultaneous but divided is what I'm asking. Do you think it's Sasquatch doing these things, or is it them along with these things?
Right. I have to be careful when I say they. I don't always mean Bigfoot. I mean,
you.
it's a plural. Like, we didn't know what else to call it, because we recorded the sound of at least 3 women walking up to us in the dead of night, talking in an unknown language for over 30 seconds, and then left us a 18-inch piece of paracord woven together like a Native American braid. That was while we were sleeping. So when I say they, I'm including these 3 mystery women who speak an unknown language. I'm including the guy that sounds like he's speaking in tongues or giving a sermon in the garage. I'm talking about whoever left these 4-fingered chalky white handprints infused in the bedroom wall that are childlike but not a child. So when I'm talking they,
I got you.
I'm talking about all the weirdness.
Yeah, no, look, we captured some ourselves. You know, Lynn and I were shooting a Bigfoot documentary with Omaha Indians in Macy, Nebraska, and got 2 full sentences of an EVP. It's on our ninth documentary we did. So I mean, and it's in Native American, and it's no doubt Native American language. Nobody knows what it's saying.
Right. I don't know if you have, Daniela, any of the audio. Can we play some of that?
I'm just looking for it now. Just give me 1 minute.
Yeah, if you look there, you'll see more complex EVPs, and you'll see one called the Mystery Women.
That's the one I listened to where I said that is so strange. You emailed me, but I can't find the. Just give me 1 minute.
Okay, yeah, go ahead. So,
yeah,
the Mystery Women one really needs a hard dive look at it. Now we had, can't remember, Scott Nelson, who I just did a conference with, a pass on it. He said he just passed on it. Wasn't what he's interested in. But there's a colleague of his, a guy by the name of Hunga Hala, who's a pseudonym for an area. He works in or near the Pentagon. He's friends with Dave Ellis, who did all our sound work for us. And he listened to it, and, you know, he hears language. Now, there's no doubt this is a language, but what language is it? And why can't anybody figure it out? It's so conversational. I mean, if Daniela can find it, you'll hear that. I mean, there's like a direct one, someone in charge, and then there's one that's more conversational, and one that kind of seems like she's trying to figure out what to do. And they just tune in and tune out a frequency. It's not an EVP, it's more of space and time being ripped back in another world, and we're getting a glimpse, and then the curtains just close. It's an incredible moment. Plus, we got this gift right between Daryl and I when we're sleeping, which is this 18-inch or better piece of woven paracord laying right on top of my recorder. So it just turned into like, well, I didn't really care if anybody believed us, because we were having such a good time. That
you have to think that way, though. You know, it's not that you don't care. You know, there's no courage in not caring. You just don't care if anything says anything negative about it. You care what people think, like everybody else would. But the naysayers, you don't care about them.
Right? Yeah.
I'm not trying to put words in your mouth, but I mean, I understand what you're saying, and that's what I would want to convey to anybody. You care, but you don't care.
Mystery Ladies, is that the one?
Now, could you hear that in real time?
Yeah, I can hear that real time. So if you could play that again, Daniela, in the beginning here, I'll explain what's happening. The snoring is Daryl on an air mattress, and then I'm sitting. Oh, it's playing now.
Sorry.
That's okay.
Right. Sorry, that had gone back. That had carried on through. I'll start.
Right. I forgot. I slowed it down for the audience so they could hear individual phonemes. So my fault. But in the beginning, there's a really distinct pop or hit or slap sound or knock. Okay, we can't pass over that information. That's data. Whatever's happening with these hit, snap, pop, slap sounds, they're associated with appertations, which we experienced and filmed. Okay, not as they were popping out of the wall, but damn near close. I think that is energy passing through the matter that you hear. So if you hear cement get slapped, something's happening with energy coming up out of the cement. If you hear wood get slapped, you're most likely hearing the sound of energy passing out of wood or bark. I don't think that Sasquatch is tree knock. Not anymore. Not after everything that happened there. I mean, maybe they'll tree knock for a lark or a joke, but these car door slams that Bigfooters experience, how are you going to hear a car door slam 10 feet from behind you in the middle of the woods? It isn't going to happen. It's happened to me on one occasion up in a place called Triangle Lake with researcher Chris Manier. That's a big one. The sound of tree knocks is obviously a huge one. But in the beginning of this audio, I get off track a little bit. You'll hear a pop or hit slap sound, and then boom, and she's already kind of talking mid-sentence. Now, I hear a woman talking. They sound maybe Euro-Asian. There seems like a European Asian.
Sounds Asian a little, yeah.
Maybe Native American, something in there too. But I can't get anybody to this. If this was a TV show playing and it somehow got onto my recorder or a radio, a frequency that attached itself to my Tascam,
you should be able to identify
in and out of view, it should still be transcribable.
Yeah.
Okay, so there's the mystery.
I'll play it again.
Play it again.
Have you played it backwards ever?
Yeah, but it sounds just as crazy.
Right.
And there were no women anywhere around when this happened?
Well, Cindy, Daryl's wife, she was the only one around.
You can tell it sounds synthetic. It doesn't sound right.
It has a synthesized quality to it, and we would pick up on that in other EVPs. And these are long, EVPs, like when I watch ghost shows,
it's one or two words.
Whisper, and it's just a little tiny thing. It was never like that. There was like, once in a while they'd do these whisper things. Like once in a while I'd hear like, Toby, look out. Like they're looking out for me or something, or, I didn't know what to make of it, but it'd be a child's voice. They would say that generally, but then there'd be these long 30-second bellowing conversations. And, but I don't know, this one's kind of the holy grail as far as weird EVPs go.
It's good. Look, we caught a long one. We caught one that's 2 sentences. So I get it. And we were out in the middle of the woods and there was no one around us, but you can tell it's different from any other speech that's going on. So you can tell that's different. It's obviously outstanding. I mean, that's incredible to me. Yeah. Someone should really be looking at that. I mean, I can see Scott Nelson. He probably gets a bunch of stuff and I'm sure he has a pretty high standard, but that's pretty good, man. I mean, my goodness.
Yeah, I don't know. I thought about readdressing it with Scott. We did a webinar, 3-hour webinar together, me and Ron, called Quantum Bigfoot Language. And I was like, I should probably get back on and restate my case with Scott just so he knows, where everything was coming from. Yeah, it's weird, but it needs some work, and I don't have the ears to work on it.
Right. Debbie Jones got one too, and I think she and Ron were actually working on hers, and hers was 2 or 3. Sounded like 2 or 3 sentences. Yeah. It was really close by, but it was a Bigfoot speaking. It wasn't an EVP type of language. This was a Sasquatch saying something. It was strange. But hey, we've gone over a little bit tonight, but hey, that's all right. It's our show. We can do that. Want to thank Toby Johnson for joining us here tonight so much, man. Thank you. You can find him on YouTube, Strange Brow Radio on YouTube. That's BRAU. Go to strangebrowradio.com. You can join them on Patreon for $2.99 a month. If I'm correct, that's right, $2.99 a month, and you can get, or is it $2.99 one time?
I think it's $3. You can get a lot of content, including the book.
All right, cool. There you go, right there. There you have it. But thank you, Toby, for joining us here tonight.
Hey, thanks, guys. Danielle, get some sleep.
Absolutely, yes, Daniela, wonderful as always. Thanks everybody for joining us here. Don't forget Saturday, 7:00 p.m. Central on Hidden Existence, the Researchers Reports, and we'll see you guys back here next Wednesday at 7 for. Who? You told me, I forgot.
Randy Harrington.
Randy Harrington. All right.
Yeah. Well, this Saturday, though, I've got Stan Gordon and Ron Moorhead. So it should be a good show.
Good show.
See you all on Saturday, hopefully.
All right.
Well, good night.
Good night, everybody.
Bye.